My name is, of course, Terry Jacobsen. I've got quite an intro over there. But I've been in this space called scent marketing or environment scenting for over 10 years now. And it was sort of accidental that I got into this space. But I've always enjoyed something a little bit different, and I've always believed in the power of experience. And what I want to take you guys through today is some of my own anecdotes and my own journey through this space and discovery of my own sense of smell. And also to prove to you that this is not actually a new thing, because we've been smelling and using our sense of smell to navigate and understand the world around us for many hundreds of years. Okay. First slide. Smell is bad. Okay. So says the church. So a few centuries ago, when the church became structured, and the objective was to make society more cultured and civilized, it was okay to see things and hear things because it implied distance away from it. But when you smell something, you internalize it. And that for them at the time was very scary. And it's something they felt was what they referred to as animal-like and woman-like. Sorry about that one, but yeah, that's a quote. So smell was never really recovered from then, and it's always been the ugly duckling of our senses. And even if we talk about the word smell, I mean, for me, I already think, well, that's a bit of an ugly word. Oh, it smells bad. So that is that. And we still don't really know how it works. So the theory of how we smell, the long-held theory, is that we smell based on shapes of molecules. A certain molecule, a certain shape passes through our noses, and we perceive it as coffee or chocolate. But there's another theory that is gaining some traction, and that is that we smell based on vibrations or frequencies, which is really quite a radical theory. And we actually do see and hear based on waves. So there's something really interesting about it, but it's super complicated theories, and some of it loses me and definitely way above my pay grade, but nonetheless really, really interesting. Smell is pretty much all of taste, 80% in fact. So if you lost your sense of smell, an apple's going to taste like a potato. And I hate eating potatoes, raw potatoes that is. Okay guys, so it's not a seeing thing, okay? And as you can see from this picture, some things are just better experienced with your eyes closed. So it's very personal, very intimate. Our sense of smell is processed in the limbic system, which is the emotional seat in our brain. And it's just, it's very instinctual, very primitive in that way. This is your brain on smell, okay? So our sense of smell is processed in the right side of our brains, controls the left side of our body. And this is our creative side, our emotional side, whereas compared to the other side of our brain is mathematical, it's rational, it's logical. So we do really need both sides of our brains in order to navigate this life. But depending on the reason to make a decision or purchasing behavior, we might require more one side of the brain than the other. And it's amazing to see how much purchasing behavior is actually focused on that right side of our brains. This is a completely, I don't know why I threw this slide in. I don't even know how I came to this, but it was really interesting if you know the ad. I'm a Mac, I'm a PC. Well, if you can see, they're also structured based on left brain, right brain. So I'm not advocating being on smell all the time, but we do need a lot of both sides of the brain's hemispheres to process information. Okay, guys, so this is the memo, the big memo, mood, memory, emotion. Fragrance or aromas can elevate our mood by as much as 40%. That's massive for me. Memory, we recall things that we smell over a longer period of time and with greater clarity than what we see or hear. So if you're trying to launch a new brand or familiarize your people with your business or brand, fragrance is certainly a powerful way to get remembered. And of course, emotion, what we discussed about fragrance being processed in the limbic system of our brain, which is the seat of our emotion. And we all know when we smell something and it takes us back to a time and a place, often it's very nostalgic. Okay. Often it's very nostalgic, and it's a very powerful thing. Okay, bit of dry academic research. Not that dry, really, but pencils and memory. Okay, interesting case study reported on by the New York Times. They subjected a research group to a scented pencil and unscented pencil. And each pencil had a number of brand name characteristics, I guess color, shape, and so forth. And after 2 weeks, they got them to try and recount how many characteristics they could recall of the pencils. In the case of the unscented pencil, they couldn't remember one. In fact, it was 0.7. How many characteristics of the scented pencil do you think they remembered? So it was more than 3. It was 3 plus. So really powerful when it comes to fragrance and memory. And the applicability for this is way beyond marketing. It's to education, it's to healthcare. So we're really just touching the surface of this. And that's really what excites me about it. And it's just such a human thing as well. In a scented environment, Nike, people are willing to pay $10 more for the same pair of sneakers. So the interesting thing about this is that the perceived value of the products had increased. Samsung, shoppers shop for longer, and they also discovered or adventured into 3 times as many zones. I guess we all have consumers that adventure, don't we? Case studies. Iron Orchard was our establishing client in Singapore some 9 years ago now, and in terms of scented shopping malls, it's quite up there in terms of case studies. And I would say maybe 8 out of 10 Singaporeans probably have either experienced this fragrance or know of this fragrance, and it just has a really powerful recall that people like to speak about. We, of course, don't only work with hotels and shopping malls, and really also talking about hotels. Hotels are really the industry that really got the usage of fragrance for a long, long time, and it's taken retailers a little bit longer to understand why do I need this, and why is it important for me to create an experience inside my store that extends way beyond purely transactional activities. Hospital, case study over here, Mount Elizabeth. So I think we all have experiences at hospital and probably smells. For me, it's things like cleaning agents like Dettol and sort of that aeroplane food for me. And the real idea was to make this hospital smell like a hotel, and for people to experience it like a hotel, and also a place for rest and recovery. So we designed a fragrance that had elements of clover and aloe, and it was meant to induce that sense of calm and restorative environment and bring some of those natural elements of the outdoors inside. Okay, and then Changi Airport, which is quite a big case study for us. So we fragrance all terminals 1, 2, and 3, and we've also deployed systems in Terminal 4 now. A massive project in terms of the scale of it, because the environments and from one area to another, whether it's an air bridge or a taxi drop-off, the spaces are so radically different. So what we need to do in those sort of scenarios is understand the airflow that's going through that sort of space, how long travelers will be spending inside each one of those zones. And so what we need to do is deliver the right amount of fragrance into each one of those spaces. So this requires a whole range of different kinds of technologies that can provide almost like a surround sound experience. So you would have some larger systems, some smaller systems for different areas in order to provide this sort of holistic fragrance experience. So we don't only do 5-star hotels and world-beating airports. We also do some public transport scenting, and this is a more recent project. It's been running about a year now, and we've designed a fragrance for Tau Transit, and they've deployed that across 100 buses. So this was really interesting because we were looking at beyond the objectivity of how do I get a passenger from A to B, but we're looking at the subjective experience of that. And research has also shown the impact of fragrance on our, of course I mentioned on our mood, but also our perception of time, where we've actually been shown to perceive the time as passing quicker or being shorter. So it's a really interesting one, that tackling the subjective nature of getting passengers from A to B. Moving along to Universal Studios, what is the smell of fear? So we work with Universal Studios for 3 years now, And this year, the smell of fear was dead body, rotting garbage, and burnt electrical wire. So we have all these ugly fragrances as well, which largely we use for either museums and military, but also for, museums and entertainment destinations, but also the military, a military simulation. So we have soldiers, and they would be in some sort of a simulation environment, and they need to make a life or death decision based on something that they smell. So there again, a sense of smell is quite important in life or death situation. So there you go. Okay, so this is a case study. We work with Marigold and Peel Fresh, and they want to obviously make their orange juice stand out and people to discover it as something very fresh and exciting. And so this is, can we play this video? Okay. With sound, if possible. Thanks.
Waiting is something that we all have to do on a daily basis, and working with Marigold Peel Fresh on this campaign of injecting bubbles with this fresh citrus fragrance, something that I feel people will embrace as a very innovative concept.
Okay. So OJ Bubbles, yes, we can. So after all that fun and 10 years of what we've been doing this through All Sense, we decided to get involved in the game and launch our own brand. And based on the same premise of how we believe how important our sense of smell is, and how everybody should be smelling more. And this is a nice quote that I like to use, because we just completely forget about our sense of smell. Unless it's really strong or it doesn't match a certain environment, we just forget about it. Because again, we have this direct neural passageway from our noses to our brains, so it's almost always working at a subconscious level. So guys, don't miss out. We breathe over 20,000 times a day. We started our own brand to reach out to consumers, as well as working with a range of brands. It's called Lulla Lab. And we've launched it a year ago, and one of our clients we've worked with here is Singapore Fashion Week. Can we play this video as well, please? Thanks.
Reminds me of my mom. It's lovely. When I went with my friends, doing Friends, and this was really good too. And it's like she's smelling it. Clarity, elegance. It smells like flowers, like clean bed sheets. My favorite thing. I like that too. I love Lulla Lab. I love Lulla Lab. I love Lulla Lab. I love Lulla Lab.
Okay. And then some other events we've done, Laneway Festival, Le Facial was an event. And it's amazing the level of engagement that people have for this. You almost have to try and beat them off. And this is our craft bar experience that we've deployed in a number of pop-up locations, but we also do a number of events with it where people could come in and we could cater to an event of a few hundred people. And everybody comes in and can actually design their own fragrance. So everything is formulaic, and we really encourage people to design fragrances based on the notes, the individual notes that they like. So we don't try to coerce people based on certain styles or trends. It's a craft bar experience. We did some work with Mulberry, which is a new season launch. And what was interesting about this one is we actually designed a Mulberry fragrance note that all their guests could come in and craft with. Create their own style. And of course, we also do workshops. This is one that occurred at Tang's, and this is one we did with Laneige. And that could be catered to for anything from a small group of 5 people up to 50. Of course, creative collaborations. Had fun on this project working with Majoko, aka Steve Lawler. And what Steve did with this is he took Chinese medicine bottles and reworked them into these beautiful artworks that you see in front of you. And all of them came along with some really interesting names. Another creative collaboration is recently what we did with Fashion Week is we worked with a number of fashion designers, everyone from Lai Chan to Nida Shea and Ling Wu. And we also developed a range of fashion fabrics, which were fragrances based on fabrics used by the various designers. So it was everything from lace to sequin to velvet and so forth. And that is it. Thank you, guys. This is a quote. Thank you. So this has become a little bit of an inspiration for me, and I just think it really is a forgotten sense. So yes, there's a lot of applicability for marketing and how we communicate. We live in such a visually dominated world, but how we smell is such an emotive thing, and it's such a personal thing that we all need to smell more. That's why I'm an advocate of that. Thank you. Yes?
Right, for the Tower Transit
Yes.
trial that you're working on, I'd like to know how you manage the scent, because it's very personal.
Yes.
And unlike a shopping mall where people have the freedom to come and go if they didn't like the scent, for a bus, you're stuck in the bus because you need to commute from point to point. So what were the challenges, and what did you do to overcome that?
Absolutely, it is a challenge because it's a closed environment, and this has never been done before. So, to my understanding, this is a first in the world. And what we did is we also designed our own technology that fits into the ventilation. So, of course, the first step was to understand what was the objective of creating the fragrance, and of course, it was something that was meant to improve the end-to-end customer experience, but also, as you know, is that fragrance a lot of the time is actually working on a subconscious level. So it's really, when it's really conscious, is often for 2 reasons. Either it's too strong or it doesn't match the environment. So smelling chocolate on a bus, everybody's going to say, where's the chocolate coming from? But if you walk into a chocolate shop and it smells like chocolate, we just expect it to smell like that. So we probably wouldn't even comment. And this is what is so important, is congruency. Matching the environment, matching the expectations of the people. In the case of Tower Transit, we wanted to design a fragrance that was really going to sit in the background. Also understand it's a warmer environment over here, so people are waiting. As soon as they jump onto the bus, it's a little bit cooler. And so we wanted to take that whole experience into account. And so the fragrance we designed has some very delicate notes in it. One of them is eucalyptus, and another of them is rose. So really it's more of a sensation of well-being, a sensation of freshness, rather than, I've just walked into a fragrance section of a department store. But certainly it is a little bit iterative, and we did go through a few trials once the client had selected a direction that they wanted with the fragrance to manage the intensity of it. Does that help? Okay. Anybody else want to ask any random questions about smell or, Steve?
So with such a kind of ambiguous medium,
Yes.
how would you sell or convince a client to invest a big amount of money in an idea that perhaps is ambiguous and not easy to sort of explain explicitly? Is there ways you can do controlled tests or demos that the client can then go in and experience for themselves and then decide whether it's worth investing? Because it seems like it could be tricky trying to sell this into somebody.
Yeah. Look, demos for sure, but I think where it all starts is understanding what the client wants to achieve. What is your objective? So say, for instance, the simplest way of using fragrance is an aroma billboard. So you sell coffee, you sell chocolate. You want to just have a lovely chocolate coffee fragrance. Another way of using fragrance is ambient. Just want a pleasant fragrance inside the environment. You don't really care. Then further up the pyramid is thematic. You sell swimming costumes. So you want to have a nice suntan lotion kind of fragrance inside the environment. And then really at the top of that pyramid, we move on to signature fragrance design, and which is a really interesting process. But what we do there is we basically look at the DNA of the brand. What does it represent? We look at the colors, if it's a physical environment, the textures, what kind of music do you play inside there, how loud is it, how long do people spend inside the environment? But also importantly, what is the objective of using fragrance? Do they want to represent the brand as it is today, or do they want to use it as a tool to communicate something different? So we would analyze all of these sort of elements and to understand exactly what the client would want in that sort of environment. But really for me, it's distilling down. So in the case of signature fragrance designers, what is the motion? What is the feeling of your brand? What do you want people to feel when they walk into your store or experience your product? And I think with that really simple kind of a question, it helps us to sort of vector directly towards things that we want. But also, we're attaching that fragrance experience to this brand. So it's something that then becomes embedded with the fabric of everything else that happens. So an olfactory logo would then fit in with your physical or visual logo, for instance. So it just becomes some multisensorial collateral or a multisensorial asset. Is that okay? Okay.
Hey, I've got a question. If you've got an existing brand with an existing scent, a little bit like the orange juice example you showed.
Yes.
But you said at the same time you have to have a little bit of congruency, so you can't have a bus smelling like chocolate. So any learnings on kind of what are the best places to distribute an existing brand, and how far you can go beyond your comfort zone? Let's say beauty brand would be the bathroom. How further out could you go, or any learnings on that?
Without knowing more detail about the brand, it's hard to say exactly, but and how daring you want to be, of course, as well.
Multiple brands. I'll give you one example. A supermarket soap brand.
Yes.
Up to where would you advertise that outside of the supermarket or
Yes.
the bathroom?
Yes. Well, I think that also comes down to where people engage with your product and what you want your product to represent in their customer's mind. So, certainly using it inside a supermarket environment is great because that's where the point of purchase is. Are there any other touch points or areas that you would consider?
Actually, that's why I'd love to hear from you what you think. For example, for me, the billboard orange juice one wasn't very intuitive, and it wouldn't feel like a natural congruency, but still you did it, right? With, I assume, quite some success. So I wanted to understand how you got there and how you go about the thinking.
Well, I guess with the orange juice case, for instance, they wanted to get out of home and they wanted to surprise people. And I think that's what bubbles do. It turns even adults into children. Everybody wants to run around and pop a bubble and smell it. So I think it created that level of engagement and fun. And I think that's why it worked in that case. And obviously because they wanted their brand to stand out as being something fresh. So that's where the bubbles really worked in. But I could equally see it working with soap bubbles. I would just need to understand what do we want to create with it. Is it a sort of comfort factor? But also you really need to look at how you're communicating that message visually or auditorily as well. So the fragrance component will just be part of that. So I don't know if that sort of answered your question.
Kind of, maybe worth a follow-up discussion later on.
Yeah, sure.
And then I have a second question. I mean, scent is very intrinsically linked to memory.
Yes.
But is there a way of creating memory with scent? Is that something that you've done in the past?
Yes, very much. So any specific example, branding related, obviously?
Just, let's take the same example as before. So if you wanted to, create a certain memory linked to let's say a soap or any other product. Yes.
Well, it can definitely be done. We're doing it all the time. So we might have memories of a holiday that we went on or an ex-boyfriend or girlfriend and a kind of a fragrance that they wore. So that's our own memories that we've associated with that fragrance. Like, for instance, to give you an example, 9/11, bit of a hectic example, but after 9/11, some researchers took samples of the burning rubble and they tested it on, it was quite a unique smell apparently, and they tested on people who had been there, New Yorkers at the time of the attack, and others that hadn't been there. And they found that those that hadn't been there had no reaction whatsoever, of course, but those that had a very strong response, negative response to that. So definitely there's a lot in that tying a fragrance to an experience or to a product.
Super, thank you.
Pleasure.
I've got a couple of questions
Sure.
for you as well.
Right.
Maybe we'll grab a few for a second
Okay.
and have a quick chat. I'm sort of interested in, a lot of marketers here will be dealing with stuff across, the Asia Pacific region and maybe beyond that as well. Is a scent that's crafted for a hotel in Singapore going to be sort of applicable for that same chain? So say it's Sands, for example. Is that going to work in Singapore and then in Las Vegas, as an example?
Yeah. It's a really interesting question because fragrance is so beautifully subjective. But I think it comes down to the intent and the design. So if you're designing a fragrance, you need to understand what markets you want to deploy it in. And I think that will definitely form part of the design process. Like, to give an example, about 10 years ago, the Four Seasons hotel, their signature was a hot apple pie kind of a fragrance. And I remember walking into the Four Seasons in Sydney, and it just really didn't work. So I think you do have these sort of trends, like for instance in the US, that do tend to like more sweeter stuff. And we just need to take these factors into account.
Yeah, so it's about that sort of cultural awareness, I guess. So
It is very much.
would for a brand like Sands, for example, would you say be unique for each hotel and make that a different sort of experience?
Well, that's definitely what they have done.
Yeah.
So you can certainly argue both ways because, and hotels is a great example to give because in the case of fragrance, how it engenders familiarity. So you could go to a Westin in Singapore, but then you could stay in a Westin in a hotel. You've arrived late at night, you're really tired. You've never been to the city before, and you walk into the Westin. Yeah, you see the logo outside or whatever have you, but you walk inside and the lobby smells like that white tea fragrance that you smelt at any other Westin you've been to. And suddenly it just transports you back then, and it creates that sense of familiarity and comfort that you really can't do as much or as well with your other senses.
Is it, do you have to be, I guess, aware of potential negative nuances as well? Scent, as you described already, is obviously a highly personal thing, and one person's experience is obviously sort of different from another. I might love the smell of fresh cut grass, but my wife might hate it because she has hay fever, and it makes her think of being snotty and having puffy eyes and that kind of thing. Do you have to be careful around what sort of areas you play in with scent?
Look, I think obviously if you're going to throw out a fragrance that smells like fresh cut grass, you're going to get a lot of more obvious responses because people have specific experiences perhaps with it. So of course a way to design fragrance, unless that's your intent, is to not make it so obviously that specific thing. So really if you take a few hints of various things that are familiar to people in a sort of background way, but not hit you on the nose, bam, that's the smell of this, and it reminds me of, dishwashing liquid or whatever have you. But I mean, we've got to deal with those sort of things, because even talking about dishwashing liquid, a lot of us associate pine and lemon with these sort of cleaning agents. And I don't think we're going to be able to arrest that kind of association very easily. So we need to find a way to work around it.
Are there many brands doing it well? Sort of, you talked about the retail example there and sort of brands on the shelf. Are there many brands actually doing it at the moment, sort of using that in the last sort of 6 feet to draw customers in?
In what sort of a retail environment in general?
In general, sort of, yeah.
Yeah, many. We have many customers that are using fragrance. Again, because it is a branding tool, but it really does create that experience. And you must understand that every environment already has some sort of natural odor inside it. It's just whether you want to control and manage that. And when you're managing the lighting, you're managing your music, why wouldn't you want to also control or pay some attention to this aspect? And to give you like an incidental example, for instance, jewelry stores. I've walked into countless jewelry stores that smell like window lean, or we might be familiar with a different product, but that is used to clean glass. So you walk in and it has this real kind of unpleasant aroma, in fact. And that's completely incidental. They just want to make sure that the glass is all clean so people can come and look at the jewelry. But in the back of your mind, you whether you realize on a conscious level or not, but that is impacting your experience of that space.
And got a question from the floor there. Can we just get the mic down? Lady, just put your hand up again, please.
But I think as well on that note, it's important, unless it's something that you want to do, try not to be gimmicky with a fragrance. Try to understand what is the core motion of your brand, what are you trying to do with that, and just stick to that, as opposed to being trying to do too much or trying to put the smell of baking bread in an elevator, for instance. Like, don't do something like that.
Hi, so my question is,
Yes.
how do you measure the aftermath, or do you guys have any postmortem reports that you guys provide in terms of, measurements of success or return on investment? Like, how do you see the impact is what I'm trying to ask.
So we do work with so many different industries and clients that they do tend to measure things in different ways. I know there's this emphasis on measuring return on investment. I think we try to look at it as ROE, return on experience. And definitely, if you see some of the case studies, and I have further research for you if you want to as well, is that it's interesting to see how fragrance does impact our perception of environments or products, how we tend to be happier inside fragrance environments, spend more time, spend more money, these sort of things. So it really just depends on the product and what you're trying to, or your experience and what you're trying to achieve with it.
Were there any tangible results from the Marigold campaign that you guys did?
Oh, so they didn't actually share any specific results with us.
Okay. Thinking for a brand like Mumbrella, should we have a smell? Obviously we're mostly sort of, engaging with people every day on a digital platform, but obviously we run conferences and events, and we run obviously a lot more in Australia than we are currently in Asia. But should we be thinking about having a distinctive scent that people walk into a conference centre or a room, whatever, and think that's Mumbrella?
Sure, I don't see why not. At the end of the day, you're using fragrance or sense of smell to create an emotional connection. So you might be reading something on a page and, I love Mumbrella and, these guys do an awesome job. And that's, again, left brain, right brain thing. So rationally, we're enjoying what's going on, but then you're just adding something else, which is that emotive component. And certainly when we return next year and we have that fragrance again, you're just going to build more on that sense of familiarity. So you are building that connection around it.
And is that almost sort of a subliminal thing for people then to sort of build that?
Well, it's not about, delivering in a subliminal way so people won't know about it. It's just delivering in a sensible way. And certainly some people are more tuned into their sense of smell, so they'll more so tend to pick these things up where others might not. But we're still being impacted nonetheless. Mm-hmm. And just to come back also in terms of research, obviously there's qualitative and quantitative, and some of our customers like to observe people, such as in the airport environment, see how long they spend in certain places, and then also conduct interviews. Start off generally asking broader questions, because really what you're trying to do is establish their emotive state to understand if they're happier in a fragrance environment than in one that is not.
Have we got any other questions from you guys? Now's a great chance. Don't be shy. We've got a couple of minutes left if you want to ask anything.
Yes.
Lady there, sorry, just wait for the mic to get to you. And
Yes.
there. Thanks.
Hi Terry, I'm actually from the learning and development space, so I'm a little off from the marketing side, but I'm actually quite interested in seeing if you've got any experience around particular fragrances that you may have worked with that might be actually quite useful for, inspiring learning or in the learning space. Any ideas?
In the learning space? Yes, absolutely. So, not a specific fragrance style that I would recommend to you, but there has been a lot of research into that, both in a study sort of environment as well with patients that have memory loss or some sort of dementia. And that's really, really interesting. I, for instance, subjected myself to a trial when I did my driver's license over here. So, because actually what happens is when you introduce a fragrance, I did pass, yes. So I think it helped. So I was there in the. Well, so the key is to choose something that is obviously not something that you wear every day. It's something unique. And when you're actually studying the information, the fragrance forms a memory imprint connected with that information. So then when you go and write that exam or whatever have you, and you bring out a little sample of the fragrance to sniff on, it just aids with the recollection of that information.
It could work either way though, right?
That you would forget the information?
Well, I mean, unless you've got a bad, like an aversive association to a particular fragrance as well.
Yeah, so the key would be to deploy or introduce something that is different.
Okay.
So again, yes, it's probably going to be something that's a little bit more, that's been known to activate our intelligence or concentration. So, things like rosemary has been known quite well to do something like that, peppermint as well. But obviously not just any kind of rosemary, because then you'd be thinking of the lamb that you cooked last week and whatever have you. So it needs to be something a little bit unique and a little bit different and specific to that, to that case.
Thanks, that's very valuable. Thank
Pleasure,
you.
pleasure.
Okay, any other questions from you guys? You can always grab Terry afterwards. I think we'll draw a line there then, because it is lunchtime next, and there's probably a few hungry people waiting to come up. Before I ask you to thank Terry, we'll just tell you that at 1 o'clock, or 1-ish, because we're running a little bit late, on the Asia stage, which is next door, we will have a lunchtime debate on the future of the CMO in Asia, which promises to be entertaining. And if you're going along, then pick up some lunch in the expo area just opposite there and take it in with you, lunchtime debate. If you're not going to go in there, please do spend a few minutes having a browse and pick up some goodies from the exhibitors in the expo as well. And seats next door on a first come, first served basis, so make sure you're in early if that's what you want to be going to. There'll also be stuff going on in the masterclass theatre as well, which is in the expo area there. It's that big sort of glass area up on the right-hand side there, so have a look at your programs. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll reconvene in here with Havas Chief Creative Officer for Southeast Asia, Valerie Madden. She'll be delivering a presentation on rethinking the creative process in advertising. And of course, make sure you're checking your program and download the app if you haven't already. And please, obviously, tweet as well. Make sure we're getting plenty of engagement there. We're trending, which is good. In the meantime, can I ask you, please, to thank Terry?
Thank you. Thank you.